Let's talk about mentors. Interesting topic. I've had a lot of mentors over the years, and I've gained a lot from mentors. The argument in the personal development space is you need a mentor. If you want to succeed and grow, you've got to have a mentor. That's kind of the argument. And I've had many mentors over the years, from Tony Robbins to Eckhart Tolle at a distance, to people that are closer and people that I actually pay and have invested, you know, tens of thousands of pounds in mentorship with. But one of the things I've learned about mentors and getting mentors is if you've ever had the experience of having a mentor and maybe it didn't go the way you thought it should, or you didn't get the result that you thought that they should give you, or it just didn't go the way that you thought it would, then, and I've had that, by the way, then I believe there's a fundamental reason for that. You see, on reflection, most of my reasons for getting mentors were not actually about learning like what I didn't know. So for example, a few years ago I got a particular mentor, and for the purpose of this video I won't mention the name of this person because they're a great friend. But my decision to invest in that mentor was fundamentally flawed, because deeply at a subconscious level, my reason for getting that particular mentor was because I had a belief that that mentor would validate me and would give me the approval and the "you're enough," that until that point in time I didn't have the courage or awareness or just confidence to just give it to myself. So the problem with mentors is, if you're going to a mentor because you want them, and here's the thing, right? Like, you've got to be honest about this, because it takes a lot of self-awareness for you to be able to admit this, if this is true for you. It takes a lot of courage to admit that the reason why you go to a mentor, like, it's taken years ago I wouldn't have been able to admit this, and now it feels a lot easier. But it takes courage to say, you know what? The reason why I got that mentor was because I didn't have a dad. My mum was emotionally unavailable, and I got this particular mentor because I wanted them to be the parent that I didn't have. So I've got a dry throat. It takes a lot of courage to admit that. You might not have to admit that. You might not have that issue. But maybe if you're watching this video, maybe you do. And it's not even just about mentors, right? I can think about friends where I have either like outwardly seek their validation or approval, or I've chased their friendship from a place of neediness because they've not chased me. Like, I can think of a friend a few years ago, started to become super successful, and we'd kind of drifted apart. And I noticed myself, as I watched him become more successful through my map of the world, I noticed myself needing his friendship even more. And it's funny because I look back on that, and on reflection, I recognize that that was an energy where I was basically going, I'm in lack, he's in abundance. I wanted his energy. And I know that for myself, like a lot of times where I've gone for mentors because I felt that they have an energy and a frequency and a level of self-belief that maybe I don't have. And I think, hey, if I just spend time with them, then maybe I'll believe in myself the way they believe in themselves. And to an extent, that does happen. That's happened for me. But the fundamental problem with getting a mentor is if you don't yet know yourself, if you haven't individuated, if you don't really know yourself. Like, I feel like in the past 18 months, I'm finally starting to know myself. And yet I still don't know myself, right? I don't think I ever will, and I don't think anybody who says they do fully know themselves does fully know themselves. Because what does knowing yourself really mean? It means you feel like you're comfortable in your reality, your beliefs, your values. Like you feel like you know what you know about yourself. But all of that is just moldable and interchangeable. Like we are human beings, we are like chameleons, right? You put us in a different environment and all of a sudden we're completely different. Like if we put us in a prison with like, if we say, if I say I'm a peaceful person, I'd never hurt anybody, I know myself, I'd never hurt anyone. And then you put me in a prison where there's murderers and I've got to defend myself from like getting beat up. All of a sudden I could become really aggressive and like put on a persona that I'm not to be messed with, right? So, do I know myself? Because now you put me in this prison, all of a sudden I'm acting completely different. So, I don't know why I brought that up as an example. I'm going to wind my windows down in the car because it's really hot. So, I think the point I'm making here is there's a time and a place for mentors, but there needs to be more time first in fully knowing yourself. Like, so there needs to be the inner world work, and this is an interesting one, this inner world work versus outer world work, because there's an argument that, like, when I used to talk about inner world work, I was like, oh yeah, listening to like a Wayne Dyer or a Eckhart Tolle or a Joe Dispenza, and then maybe outer world work was like a Tony Robbins, right? Unfair on any of them to say that they're inner or outer, right? It's not fair. Who's to say, right? Well, whether they're inner or outer, you may have a completely different view on that. You may say Tony Robbins is inner and whatever. Anyway, the point I'm making here is, anytime you're listening to voices outside of you, like this video, the ironic thing being that it's me speaking to you, giving my interpretation of things. But fundamentally, the reason I'm doing this video is for me to understand and articulate for my own benefit more than anybody else's. These videos are they're like a little therapy session for me, right? But unless you really spend time doing the inner work, and for me, what I've learned, that inner work is being silent, things like journaling, meditation, breath work, inner child work, therapy, where you really go in, you strip back all the voices outside and you really go into what is really deep inside. Till you spend an amount of time doing that, if you get a mentor and they say this is the way, the problem with that is it may be the way, but that doesn't mean that you'll get what you need. So like Tony Robbins says, you know, you probably heard me say this before, I love this phrase, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. So the mentor may take you down this success road, but you don't even want to go down that road. Like you get there and you achieve it and you didn't want it. So like the mentor that I've just had in the past 18 months, I didn't need, I was going through a point. I'd just started therapy and I was doing a lot of shadow work and inner child work. And so that particular mentoring year was, in many respects, was not relevant. Or it wasn't landing the way that old mentoring was, because I was figuring out myself. So I was kind of going against what the mentor said. Like I was like, I know you say that I should do this and this is the way, but that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel congruent. It doesn't feel like that's what I want to do. So as Tony said, you know, you can have success, but that doesn't mean that you'll get fulfillment. I think you need both, but I think the fulfillment one's more important. But again, that's just my belief, right? Does that mean it's true? No, it's just my belief. But what I do know is that if you spend more time individuating, really learning about yourself, deep reflection, deep journaling, deep meditation, deep breath work, inner child work, therapy, really going in, they're not saying that you're not a happy person now, but I think you'll be an even happier person. Like, I've had relationship issues. It's ironic. My relationship with myself, Sati, my wife, and my children is better than it's ever been. Yet outside of the home and outside of self, there are relationships that are now becoming, there's been friction. And my interpretation of the reason why is because the old paradigm personality element of me, which was the stereotypical pleaser, is I'm less in my pleaser energy. So people are not necessarily that I'm having conflict with. Like, I've had some conflict recently with my mum, and I've said some things to her that I stand by. Articulated it pretty well, but she didn't like it. But I stand by it. The way I said it could have been said better. I admit that. But no one's perfect, right? But I stand by I'm stand by the message behind it. Won't go into the details. And there's other relationships where I've had similar things, and it's ultimately because I now recognise that for the vast majority of my life, I've been focused on pleasing others rather than pleasing self. And as my good friend Vinay Palmer said, you know, you've got to learn to be selflessly selfish, meaning if you don't put your own oxygen